Hey, how's everybody doing today? Welcome back to another episode of Coffee Talk with Brohawk. And I'm excited. I have a repeat guest here, but it's for a very good reason because Marty, you've been busy recently.
Yes,
Um,
I have. Yes, I have. Yeah, things have been pretty busy. I published my book a few, well, it's been about a month ago now, a little bit more than a month ago, and
Excellent.
put that out there, and been doing the work to promote that and get that in front of folks, but also been busy with my day job, right? So
Yes.
things have been going really well.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, so the book is entitled MVP KB. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
that's correct.
Yes.
MVP KB, and the subtitle is a practical guide for service knowledge management.
Excellent. So tell us a little bit about what your motivation, what your inspiration was for writing the book.
Yeah, it's really pretty simple. The inspiration was, what would I have wanted to have when I first started out my journey in customer service knowledge management?
Uh-huh.
I was working for Apple as a trainer at the time and got pulled over to Nest by some friends who went over to Nest, and they were like, "Hey, we need somebody to fix our knowledge base." And I was like, "Okay, let me see if I can figure that out."
Uh-huh.
And since then, I've been on this knowledge management journey, and I've picked up so many different trip tricks and tips
Uh-huh.
to get things done successfully. Had some great successes, had some failures with the different projects, and so I wanted to bring all that together and put it into basically a guidebook for somebody who doesn't have a lot of knowledge management expertise, maybe doesn't even really know what knowledge management is, to be able to take that book and have him or her go through it and be able to stand up a knowledge base that's really going to be the most valuable player in their customer service organization.
That's awesome. Um, yeah, I think a lot of people these days are getting thrown into to knowledge management and being that go-to person within the organization, much the same as what happened with you, but with the added um, uh, need of how do you integrate this with AI?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and yeah, so it just levels up the whole knowledge discussion.
It does. Knowledge management is so crucial for successful AI, especially in the customer service realm, where a lot of times the focus is on, chatbots, right?
Hmm.
Chatbots that are supercharged with LLM and don't just have pre-scripted answers, but are able to look at your knowledge base and find the right solutions for customers or even agents, right?
Hmm.
And you really have to be mindful of the content and make sure that your knowledge base content is well structured, that it's up to date and relevant, that it's not scattered across a bunch of different systems, that it's accurate and
Hmm.
it's not duplicative, right? So many times I've encountered companies where they stand up an AI chatbot and they say, okay, we're going to point our knowledge base, and they find, oh well, it's kind of giving the wrong answers because it found three or four different sources of information and it kind of tried to guess which one was the right one, right? And
Uh-huh.
so, you really have to be thoughtful about how you're implementing that underlying knowledge base. But the really great thing too is that AI can help with the knowledge creation. So you can have it so that you don't have to be an expert tech writer, for example, to write a
Okay.
good knowledge base article. You can be a frontline agent and you come up with a new solution to a problem and just put a few notes into a little window, hit
Hmm.
submit, and it crafts a nice little knowledge article that then you want to have somebody who's a human being take a look at it
Yep.
and say, yeah, this is right, or oh, maybe I need to tweak it a little bit. But it just really speeds up the process for creating new content. And that AI can also be used in the analysis phase. It can
Hmm.
help you find, okay, what is duplicated, what's out of date, how are people using it, what recommendations would you offer for us to improve on this, right? So AI is really, to my mind, kind of the ultimate knowledge management tool because it can not only help share that knowledge, but also help help curate that knowledge.
Well, and probably also cross-reference where you do have duplication within
Exactly.
your, within your existing structures. Um,
Exactly.
the um, so the having this comprehensive knowledge management system, um, kind of threads its way all the way through the organization. And with AI, like we were talking, with AI, it just kind of simplifies um, the whole knowledge journey for people. Regardless of what organization, it can, as long as the AI is available for everyone, they should be able to go ahead and access articles from cross-functional areas and allow agents to really get up to speed a lot faster with taking different contact types that they may not necessarily always be taking.
Yeah, I mean, you have, companies out there that are providing solutions that are basically simulators, right? They're AI
Yeah.
simulators where you go in and it role plays. When I was
Yep.
a trainer at Apple, we would do role plays, but it was me, or maybe I might bring in a couple other people to help with it, and then the
Hmm.
rest of the class. And it took us a long time to get through that. And you can only do so many of those per day. With
Yes.
AI, one agent can spend all day working one-on-one with the simulator, getting different types of requests and just doing that bit of role playing before they ever, hit the phones or hit the chat. And
Yep.
that's super, super powerful. And with, these modern AI systems and just with a knowledge base in general, the real kind of win that you get with that is through that agent onboarding experience, right? Getting somebody
Hmm.
up to efficiency as quickly as possible. I've been working with a client over the last several months. That was their main motivation for getting a knowledge base going. They were for their new hires, it was taking them 16 weeks to get them to proficiency because they didn't have a
Mm.
knowledge base. They would put them
Yep.
through a training, this fire hose of information that the agents couldn't remember at all. And so then they get
Yep.
out there and maybe they were trained on how to solve X, Y, or Z problem, but it doesn't come up until 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks into their tenure. And now they kind of
Hmm.
go, where was that? Let me go. Do I dig around in the triangle? Let me go tap somebody on the shoulder and take them away from what they're doing. With a good knowledge base and good AI tools, you can make that knowledge transfer to those agents just so much more efficient.
You enable an agent um, to navigate and leverage as opposed to memorize.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. Because I don't know
Yep.
about you. I mean, when I was an agent, that was kind of the model that we used, right? It was like, okay, here's your training, learn all this stuff and memorize it.
Uh-huh.
And it could be really hard to memorize all that stuff. Now, the more you did it and your real job, the more you kind of learn it and understand, okay, yeah, this is something that I do. It's kind of like
Uh-huh.
riding a bike. But with a new agent, they still need those training wheels because they're not going to do it. They haven't done it a million times before. And so that has been, hammered into them through repetition, right? So many
Yep.
times I've seen where you've got new agents, relatively new agents, and the QA team is scoring them and they say, oh, well, you missed this, this, and this. Okay, you
Hmm.
obviously need to be retrained. And so they'll take them off the phones and put them through a training class. Well, you've
Yep.
lost that resource from the phones and you gotta have somebody to cover that. And they're going in
Hmm.
through this class and they have to memorize this stuff. And maybe this time it sticks, but maybe it doesn't.
Hmm.
Whereas if you focus your training on, how do you use the tools? What do you need to know to use the tools? What are the different tools? How do you
Yep.
find information that you need and have a good solid knowledge base for them to where they can find that? You don't really have to do that. Take them off the phones. You can just say, "Oh, hey, just take a look at this article next time," and it's just so much better.
Not so the whole concept about the fluidity of knowledge kind of reminds me of that visual where you have somebody trying to pour water into a glass, and eventually, if you're memorizing, that glass is going to get filled up and it's going to start overflowing, and things are going to start falling off.
Yep.
Yep. Whereas with a solid foundational knowledge base, then all of a sudden. um, knowledge becomes very fluid,
Yeah, it does.
and the cup never fills up.
That's I love that analogy. It's so true. It it is fluid in that sense, and it doesn't overflow like the water in the glass. It just kind of finds its own level,
Yep,
and the agents are able to manage that a little bit better, right?
yep,
So yeah, 100%. Think that and for new agents or even for more senior agents, having a good solid knowledge base is really crucial to making sure you have really high quality support, right? And so
yep.
that people can find the answers quickly. But it comes into play with customers too, right? Because very often companies, when you talk about knowledge base, they're thinking about their self-help portal, right? And that's the
Yep.
knowledge base, and other stuff is called documentation, if it's called anything. So you need to be surfacing that knowledge to customers, and that can be a little tricky, right? Because we both know there's some types of processes and information that you have in an internal knowledge base that really isn't suitable for customers. Maybe it's not
Mhm.
written in the right language, or maybe it's, talking about tools that they don't have access to, or any number of
Yep.
reasons, right? And so you need to really be looking at it holistically. It's like, okay, these are all knowledge articles, and who are the audiences for these articles, and have them all in the same location, but have it separate out and have some discernment and some permissions on the different types of information.
Oh, love it. So if an organization is like, yeah, we got to do something with knowledge, um, we just don't know where to start. How can an organization, self-assess or even, potentially work with someone on assessing the current state of knowledge within their organization?
Yeah, I talk about this in the book, not in great detail and depth, but
Mhm.
that assessment is the crucial first step.
Mhm.
You need to assess, you know, what what systems and tools you're using now for knowledge management and how they integrate. But you also need to assess what are the workflows that go on to make that knowledge accessible and get published, and who are the people that are doing all this work, right? So you
Mhm.
you have to look at kind of three pillars is the way I think of it. Your systems, your content, and then your people,
Yep.
and assess all of that, and from all that and identifying where the gaps are, then you can build a roadmap, build a solution, build a strategy for your knowledge management activities, right? And that knowledge management strategy, ideally, it's a company-wide knowledge management strategy that takes into account the knowledge needs of not only customer support, but your sales team and all that. But even if it's just contained within one of those, you know, kind of functional groups, it's still really crucial to have a strategy to know where we're going. We're all on the same page of where we're going and where we want to get. What are the KPIs we're trying to achieve, right? But it
Yep.
all starts with that assessment, identifying what the gaps are and what your requirements are.
Looking at knowledge, um, as a strategic differentiator.
Hmm.
I love that concept. Um, I love that concept because, you know, previously it was okay, marketing has their strategy and sales has their strategy and contact center has their strategy and all of them to achieve certain objectives. But
Hmm.
knowledge, it kind of like training, it was like, oh, well, I guess we have to do this. Um, and now it's
Yeah,
becoming more intent. Now knowledge is becoming a lot more intentional, a lot more strategic than what it ever has been.
sure. And it's always been very strategic. Knowledge management is a key identified function in the armed forces, for example. The
Hmm.
armed forces, look at knowledge management as you know that battleground intelligence, right? All that knowledge
Yep.
that they need to kind of assess the situation and provide the right response. But it's just as true for companies. You have to kind of understand what knowledge you have and where it's at and how it can be deployed in the most effective way. And you do that by having a knowledge management strategy. And you hit the nail on the head that, for most companies, if they even think about the concept of knowledge management, they're like, well, this isn't a super high priority. It's nice to have it, but we can get by without it. I would
Yep.
argue that no, you can't, because it's very crucial to have a really good understanding of what knowledge is out there and where it's going. How are you retaining the knowledge? How are you extracting the knowledge that people are gaining, right?
Yep.
And knowledge management and training play very closely together. Um, Many times what you'll have is the training team has been given ownership of the knowledge management function. Um,
Hmm.
I'm a bit different than most people. I tend to think of knowledge management as the big umbrella that training rolls up under. A lot of the
Hmm.
L&D folks would, you know, hardly say, no, you're wrong, Marty. But it's to my mind, training is another way of managing transferring knowledge, right? And
Yep.
so it kind of fits under that knowledge management umbrella, and then when you look at it that way, you've got your training and or learning and development, but you've also got your knowledge management systems, you've got your learning management systems, so those are your libraries, but you've also got the people again, the people developing the training, the people leading the training, people developing the knowledge articles, the people curating the knowledge articles, right? And so
Hmm.
you have to really look at it in that big picture sense to find out where we're duplicating efforts, where do we have some opportunities to maybe have some folks pick up some different responsibilities and that sort of thing, right? But it doesn't happen unless you have a really thoughtful, intentional conversation about it.
It's funny as you're going through that, I'm thinking, you know, I'm going to date myself here. I'm going to talk about libraries.
Yeah.
When when we were younger, you wouldn't expect the librarian to write every book in the library, but you expected her as to be able to help guide you to the different books within the institution
Hmm.
that that somebody was looking for so that they can get the answers that they're looking for at the moment.
Yep.
And I love what you're talking about because knowledge management, you basically become that library of resources. Um,
Yep.
and the knowledge management or the senior knowledge management person is really the librarian over where everything else flows within an organization.
It's true. I've seen it time and time again as, I've done knowledge management for different organizations.
Uh,
It becomes this thing where they start looking at you as kind of the axle of everything that's going on, right? Because you've got, where the right policy is for this situation. You know when it was last updated, if it doesn't exist, so they
hmm.
come to you and say, hey, we're having a problem with this, can you help us fix it, right?
Yep.
It's happened to me so many times in my career as a knowledge manager.
So you would probably have a career path. Today's knowledge management professional probably would do very well if they had a degree in library science.
Yeah,
Uh,
it really has a lot to do with library science, right? But again, that's just
yep.
part of knowledge management, but you're 100% spot on. That's why I was talking about, you know, knowledge management systems or even learning management system is kind of e-libraries, right? They're the libraries where the documentation, whether it's a knowledge article or whether it's a training, you know, module, that's a library where it's stored and it's organized, and you have to have a good taxonomy so that it's structured well, and you have to have a really
Mhm.
good, AI assisted findability option so that you can
Yep.
find that content. So many times in the past when we didn't have these AI tools, there might be a search for knowledge, and agents would search for some keywords or something like that, and they bring up a list of like 10 articles where all those words
Mhm.
appeared. Then they have to still kind of go through and find which is the right one. Well, now with AI assist, that doesn't have to happen, right? It can just be
Yep.
listening in on the conversation. You can ask it a question, and it'll say, "Here's the answer. Here's the best answer for you," right? It might say, "Hey, there's some other things that you might be interested in," but it's going to help you surface that most accurate knowledge much quicker.
I love it. I love it. So, as someone's reading through your book, um, how should they be looking to apply some of the principles that you talk about? Some of the principles of knowledge within how should they be applying it within their organization? What are some recommendations that you have?
Yeah, my main recommendation is just start.
Mhm.
Pick something and just get started with it, right?
Yep.
Do that assessment and figure out where your gaps are. Determine, is the platform we're using right now really, helping us along, or is it slowing us down? And do we
Yeah.
need to bring in something else, right? And
Mhm.
and start those discovery conversations with different vendors who might be able to provide you with the right solution, right? Um, you know, I think it's really crucial to have somebody who is an owner of that knowledge base, right?
Mhm.
There needs to be somebody that's kind of their main function, and they're really responsible for overseeing it.
Yep.
In organizations where there's not really a defined owner, you might set up a knowledge base, but because nobody's looking after it and making sure that it's doing what it's supposed to do, it just doesn't get used. It people ignore it, or they don't trust it, right? Because
Hmm.
it's not being maintained. I was on a call late last year with it was a partner, and we were talking about their knowledge management system. They kind of shared their screen with me, and there was a number of articles, and they all had the last updated dates on them, and they were like 2017. And I said to him, you know how I can tell nobody's using your knowledge base? Because that says 2017 on it, right? That was 7 years before the call that we had, and that just means that it hasn't been updated since then. And so who's going to trust that, right? You're
Yep.
going to look at something like that's 7 years ago. Does that even apply now, right? So
Uh-huh.
because they didn't have somebody who was responsible for making sure that happened, they just set up a knowledge base and said, okay,
Yep.
people can publish things in here. You've got the permissions, but they would stop using it because that wasn't somebody's job to do it.
Check that box, right?
Check the box. Yeah,
Check the
exactly.
box. Well, this has been a great conversation. Where can our viewers get their own copy of MVP
MVPKB is available wherever fine books are sold. We've got the ebook version on all the platforms, so Amazon, Apple Books. You can also get the print version through Amazon and other sites as well. I've got a page on my website, so if you go to www.cognita-km.com, there's a
Okay.
page there that tells you about the book and has links to different places you can find it.
Excellent. I'll make sure in the comments when this is posted, when our interview is posted, I'll make sure I put a link to that page on your website.
Great.
Um, so, um, well, this has been great. So, if someone wants to pick your brain a little bit more around the work, the knowledge work that you do, um, um, they'd love to have you come in and speak to their organization or do an assessment or anything like that. What conferences are you attending? How can people get in contact with you?
Well, again, through the website, you can get in
Uh-huh.
touch with me. I'm also on LinkedIn, so find me on LinkedIn, and we can start a conversation there. I am going to the Benchmark Portal Conference a little bit later this year in October. I'm going to be sponsoring the first day coffee break, so I'll be hanging around
Excellent.
there, and people want to find me at that. If they're attending, we can talk. And but yeah, the traditional methods, the um, LinkedIn and on my website, they'll provide lots of different ways to get in touch with me.
And that benchmark portal conference, their call center campus just happens to be in Austin, Texas, where you and I are both based out of.
Yes, I'm very excited about this. This is one of the reasons
Yes.
I was like, yes, I'll definitely sponsor that because it's just a drive, of a few
Yep.
minutes. It's not flying all the way across the country, and I'm really excited.
Exactly. Excellent. Well, Marty, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you sharing a little bit of your knowledge, with our viewers today. And I would definitely encourage you to check out Marty's book. Um, it's such a great primer, and it will. If you're a curious person, like I know both Marty and I are, it's gonna lead you down a path of knowledge excellence. So, Marty, thank you very much, and we look forward to talking with you again, hopefully soon.
All right. Thank you, Mark. It's been a pleasure.
All right, thanks.